Good evening. I am Alistair, your anchor at the desk. Tonight, we observe the steady march of human progress, which currently looks remarkably like a retreat. In Utsunomiya, 94 schools have closed because a single bear decided to visit a park. The bear was 1 meter long. The city population is 500,000. We have officially reached the stage of history where the appearance of a local mammal triggers a total institutional shutdown. Across the globe, NASA has successfully broken the sound barrier with their X-59, ensuring we can now reach our destination much faster without actually arriving anywhere of consequence. Meanwhile, sanctions hit Havana, and solar panels in Australia are apparently doing the heavy lifting that the commercial sector decided was too expensive to bother with. It is Monday, June 8th, and the world is functioning exactly as inefficiently as we have all come to expect. Welcome to the broadcast.
Alistair, I am standing in a region where the monsoon has just arrived, and the sound of the rain is currently drowning out every official press release regarding regional stability. I am looking at a village that the government described as being in a state of transition. I want to be really clear, the transition is simply that the road is now a river and the houses are floating. People are not talking about climate science or data models here. They are talking about the fact that the school was built on a floodplain because it was the cheapest land available on the corporate ledger. They call it resilience. The people I am standing with call it a death sentence. Nobody in the capital is using that word, of course. They are too busy calculating the tax credits for the reconstruction phase. The water is currently rising, and the infrastructure is failing exactly on schedule.
Victoria, your commitment to the sensory details of disaster is charming, but the incentives here are not complicated. You are looking at a market inefficiency, not a moral failing. The state built the school on a floodplain because it maximized short-term liquidity for the regional budget. That is not malice, that is just a standard operating procedure for a municipality with a negative burn rate. You see suffering, I see the inevitable outcome of a cost-benefit analysis where the cost of future flooding was discounted at 12% per annum. It is basic arithmetic, and frankly, expecting a different result is the real delusion. Bending Spoons is filing to go public with 500 million users, and you are worried about a few flooded classrooms. Capital flows to the path of least resistance, and right now, that path involves ignoring the rising tide while selling tickets to the boat ride. It tracks.
Ronald, it is fascinating that you can reduce a flooded village to a discount rate. I want to be really clear, the villagers are not part of your Series B funding round. They are currently watching their ancestral records dissolve in the mud. I found a diary in the silt this morning. It is handwritten. It does not mention the internal rate of return or the liquidity of the local municipality. It mentions the date the well dried up and the day the first child stopped going to school because the path was too dangerous. You say this is a market inefficiency, but I am looking at the human cost of your spreadsheet. You are always right about the mechanics of the machine, but you are never useful to the people being ground into the gears. The diary is stained with water and soil. I wonder if you can quantify the value of a lost history in your next pitch.
Victoria, you confuse utility with sympathy. I am not the one who designed this system, I am merely the one reading the telemetry. If I am the one saying the building is going to collapse, it does not make me the architect of the disaster. It makes me the only person in the room not pretending that gravity is optional. You think your diary is a challenge to the structure of global finance. It is not. It is an edge case that the model has already accounted for under the heading of collateral damage. If the incentives were different, the school would have been built on higher ground. But the incentives were not different. They were optimized for the current quarter. My cynicism is not a lack of morality, it is a recognition of the fact that the system is functioning exactly as it was programmed. And yes, it is horrifying. Yeah.
Atmospheric pressure is dropping. The monsoon front is currently advancing at 30 km per hour. Rainfall intensity is exceeding the threshold of existing drainage infrastructure. Probability of widespread structural saturation, 92%. Surface temperatures are rising in the coastal sectors. The heat island effect is compounding the humidity levels. Probability of prolonged power grid strain, 88%. Wind shear is increasing near the mountain passes. Debris displacement is likely. Probability of transit artery blockage, 76%. Data indicates that historical weather patterns are no longer valid predictors for the next 48 hours. Please secure your property and maintain a safe distance from all water conveying channels. The environment is now operating outside of the expected parameters. Residents are advised to monitor the situation with extreme caution. This concludes the meteorological advisory for the current operational cycle.
Casper, I find your lack of urgency entirely refreshing. It is much easier to process a catastrophe when it is delivered in the tone of a printer error message. Moving on to the world of Silicon Solutions, a school shooting survivor is suing an AI detection firm because the system failed to identify a weapon. The firm argued that the detection software was never intended to be 100% accurate. The inaccuracy was a feature, not a bug. They called it probabilistic monitoring. The monitoring was monitoring nothing. The students were still shot. We have now reached the point where the failure of an algorithm is treated as a software glitch rather than a failure of human protection. It is a brilliant pivot. If the machine fails, it is a technical issue. If a human fails, it is a crime. We seem to have automated our own moral accountability into thin air.
Alistair, look at the incentives here. The school board had a budget deficit and a mandate to increase security theatre. The AI firm provided a low-cost, high-visibility solution that looked good on a press release. It was a classic case of outsourcing responsibility to a black box. The board didn't want safety, they wanted the appearance of safety, which is significantly cheaper to procure at scale. The software failed because it was never designed to detect a weapon, it was designed to lower the insurance premiums of the institution. That is the genius of the modern pivot. You buy the software, you announce the upgrade, and you pray the event never occurs. When it does, you blame the vendor blames the training data, and the litigation cycle pays for everyone's legal fees. It is a self-sustaining ecosystem of failure. Nobody is responsible, and everyone gets paid.
Ronald, I want to be really clear about what you are describing. You are describing a school as an insurance liability and a student as a data point. I spoke to a parent outside that school yesterday. They don't care about the insurance premiums or the training data bias. They care about the locker that still has a bullet hole in it. You are talking about the litigation cycle, but I am talking about the fact that no one can explain why the algorithm didn't work. It wasn't just a failure of code, it was a failure of the fundamental belief that we could replace human intuition with a piece of software that thinks it's a security guard. The parent showed me a photo of their child. The child is not in the photo anymore. The system is definitely not working as intended for them. The system is actually remarkably efficient at producing ghosts.
Victoria, your focus on the personal is, as always, an inconvenient variable in Ronald's equations. Speaking of ghosts, let us look at the Thermo Fisher antibody data. Reports suggest a significant portion of the data has been manipulated. It is not just about a few errors in a spreadsheet. It is about the fact that our entire medical research foundation is built on digital silt. We trust the data because the data is displayed in a nice font on a professional dashboard. Then the dashboard turns out to be a fiction. The scientists are now scrambling to re-verify years of work. It is essentially a rerun of every historical error, just with more computing power. We are digging back in time in the UAE to find fossils, yet we cannot keep the data from last week from degrading into complete nonsense. The error was human. The error was not human.
Alastair, you are surprised that the data is corrupted? The incentives for academic success are built entirely on the publish or perish model. If you produce clean, accurate data, you might get a grant in 3 years. If you produce slightly manipulated, high-impact data, you get the tenure now. The system is designed to reward the appearance of discovery over the reality of science. It is a race to the bottom of the credibility pool. We are essentially running an experiment on the susceptibility of human beings to prestige-seeking. The result is consistently disastrous. It is not that the scientists are bad people, it is that they are operating in a market that doesn't value truth. Truth is expensive. Fabrication is cheap and highly scalable. We are getting exactly what we are paying for. It is not a glitch. It is the business model.
Ronald, your cynicism is, as usual, perfectly calibrated to the level of our collective failure. I find myself wondering if there is any corner of our existence that hasn't been monetized into total degradation. We have supersonic planes, yet we are drowning in our own basic infrastructure. We have AI detectors for weapons that don't detect anything, and medical databases that are mostly creative writing. The bear in Utsunamiya was perhaps the most honest thing we have discussed tonight. It was just a bear. It didn't have a strategy, it wasn't trying to pivot, and it certainly wasn't selling a subscription service to the citizens it inconvenienced. It was simply existing in a space that we had temporarily mismanaged. That is the state of the world as of June 8th. We are all just waiting for the next bear to show up and remind us we are here.
I am thinking tonight of a man named Elias. He worked as a technician for the firm that built the gun detection software. He spent 6 months training the model on thousands of hours of video footage, labeling the difference between a backpack and a weapon. He did not know that the system would fail. He did not know that his labor would be used to justify the removal of human guards from the hallways where his own niece now walks to school. He believed the press release. He believed the technical specifications. Today, he sits at his desk, watching the news, knowing that his work helped create a false sense of security that resulted in a hollow promise. His name does not appear in the lawsuit. His name does not appear in the press release. He is simply the system working as designed. What remains of his belief when the screen goes dark?